Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to NASCATV. We're excited to have you all with us this afternoon. As you're dialing in, please take a moment to rename yourself, include your state name or company name so that we know who's with us on today's call. And then if you have a second, also please drop your information in the chat. We'd love for you all on the call to connect with each other and for us at NASCA to be able to connect with you as well. So again, welcome into today's conversation for another edition of our National Emerging Issues webinar. Today we'll be discussing risk management. I'm Kathleen Kelly, the research manager here at NASCA. We're thrilled to have you all with us to have a conversation around this important issue for state government. I'm joined by a distinguished panel who'll be with us sharing their expertise and thought leadership. So before we start, just a few reminders. Today's webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on NASCA's Knowledge Center in just a few days. During today's webinar, we invite you to submit any questions or comments using either the chat or the Q&A feature. All right, we're going to start things off with a few poll questions to see where you're all at with risk management. So Madison, if you could first launch the first poll, thank you very much. Which of the following risk management areas does your organization cover? Please choose all that apply. So we have risk loss prevention, insurance, claims management, health and safety, records management, regulatory compliance, or other areas. All right, we'll give folks a moment or so to select all the answers that apply. Again, this is a multiple choice answer on which risk management areas your organization covers. This will provide us some good background information for our discussion today. All right, we got a lot of good answers coming in here. Give folks another moment or so. Okay, it looks like we have a really good even mix across the board. Claims management is coming in strong, as well as insurance. Madison, if you could close the poll and post the results, please. Okay, we have claims management at the top here with 74%, followed quickly by insurance, and then loss prevention, records management, regulatory compliance. So a pretty good mix here. All right. Thank you for answering that. Madison, if you could launch the second poll question, please. How embedded is risk management in the processes and key decision-making at your organization? Please choose the answer that best matches. So we've got very embedded, somewhat embedded, neutral, partially embedded, not embedded at all, or just not applicable. Again, we'll give folks a few more moments to select the answer that best applies. We appreciate you guys filling out these poll questions as they do provide us with some good gauge of where you're at with risk management. All right. I think, Madison, if you could post the results for this one. Okay. So pretty high in the somewhat embedded. So about 50% of folks, risk management is somewhat embedded in the processes and key decision making, and then followed by very embedded with a strong 30%. No one said not applicable, and only 5% said not embedded at all. All right, and we have one third and final poll question for you, Madison, if you could launch that one. Which of the following risks are you most concerned with at your organization? So we have employee safety and security, cybersecurity, financial security, facility security, constitutional violations, placement, and other. So we will address some of these concerns later in the conversation today. All right, give folks a few moments for this one. Got a lot of answer choices here. And again, this is a choose all that you're concerned with. All right. Madison, if you want to post the results, please. Okay. So a good mix across the board, cybersecurity with the most at 38%, and then followed quickly by employee safety and security, 33%. We've got facility security at 19%, financial security not so much at 5%, constitutional violations only at 0%, and placement as well at 0%. So cybersecurity is definitely one of the biggest concerns. Okay. Well, thank you all for answering these polls and providing us with this insight. It's a great way for us to get started in today's conversation. Again, we are thrilled to have you here at NASCATV. NASCATV is an ongoing opportunity to meet with thought leaders who are members of NASCA and engage with other states and corporate partners to address emerging issues affecting state governments across the board. We're excited to dig into today's conversation on risk management. But before we get too far into the discussion, I'd like to first ask our panelists to please introduce themselves and give an overview of their areas of responsibility in their respective state. So Janet, if you could start us off, please.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Janet Morrow. I'm the Administrator for Capital Asset Management for the state of Oklahoma, and we are housed under the Office of Management and Enterprise Services. Risk management falls within that for our team. So that includes agencies in higher education, property and liability, workers' compensation placement, claims management, loss prevention services, and then we also provide coverage for several political subdivisions, including conservation district, tag agents, and rural fire districts.
Of course, I'm muted. Thank you very much, Janet. I appreciate you. Rachel, you're up next.
I'm Rachel Terry. I am the State Risk Manager for the state of Utah, which is housed within our Department of Government Operations. Our Division of Risk Management provides property, liability, and auto insurance coverage, claims administration, loss control services to all of our covered entities. And we cover all the state agencies, higher education, and K through 12, including some charter schools who opt in.
All right, thank you. And Shelley.
Good afternoon. I'm Shelley Hoffman. I'm the Risk Program Manager for the Department of Administrative Services in Oregon. And our team addresses all risk-related activities for the state. We have 28 folks. One person works on risk finance. We have a claims team that works on tort claims and property claims for the state of Oregon. And then we also oversee and pay for our claims out of the state accident insurance fund for workers' compensation. It's nice to meet you all.
Thank you for being here. And Jason.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Gates. I am the Director of Risk Management for the state of Wisconsin. We are housed in the Department of Administration, and the section we fall within is the Division of Enterprise Operations. Very similar to some of my colleagues and peers here, we oversee workers' compensation, property, liability, and safety and loss control, risk financing, the insurance purchases, claims administration for the state of Wisconsin operations. So by quick description, that would be all of our state agencies, inclusive of the University of Wisconsin system, so the university system. And then just for a kind of a picture of the way things work, we're a relatively small group in the enterprise office of risk management within my division. And then we rely very heavily on our agencies and institutions to perform their risk management activities with our contacts within those agencies. So it's kind of a decentralized focus that rolls into our centralized office. We do not oversee all of those individuals, as some of you can probably relate to. A lot of the agencies have their own risk management staffs, but we certainly work very, very closely with them on all things risk related.
All right, great. Again, thank you all for being here. Let's get started with our conversation with a quick question on the overall theme. Why is risk management vital to help keep state government operations running smoothly? Shelley, we're going to start with you.
Sure, thank you. We help with state government by helping agencies accomplish their mission, vision, and values without having to worry about some of the risks and the exposures. We help folks assess what their risk might be. We buy insurance, we self-insure for many of the same issues, and in that way, we're helping state government complete their mission values by making sure to keep the insurance pieces all in place for every state agency, board, commission, and At the end of the day, I think it's really valuable to have us as a partner. We can help also with grants and insurance contracts where you're looking at indemnity and insurance provisions. And a lot of that takes a lot of expertise and time, and we do assist with that as well. So I think we're basically here to support our agencies in accomplishing their missions, and sometimes in a really risk-adverse arena.
Great. Thank you for that. All right, Jason.
Sure, I'll just build on that a little bit. A message that I share rather routinely within our organization is risk is inherent in everything we do, right? In both our work lives and our personal lives, risk is everywhere. So the conversation, kind of building a little bit on what Shelley was talking about, is, how do you get the message out to analyze, make decisions around certain processes, certain operations that might be taking place. That's messaging I use a lot. I think it's critical to have that conversation because our overall goal, not unlike some of the things Shelley just shared, is obviously employee safety, protection of assets, helping agencies run, or supporting them rather, maybe is a better word to use, in their mission critical focuses. However, doing it as safely as possible and making sure that we've made considerations. A lot of times, a lot can be accomplished by talking about things. Sometimes we can't avoid all risks of state government operations. So can you insure those, self-insure those, or more often than not, can you put guardrails around something? Can you do something a little bit differently to make sure the right focus is had? So that's really a lot of the time I focus my energy on. I hope that perspective helps, but you're not going to always avoid risk. It's everywhere. It's how do you deal with it? And that's why I think risk management is critical to functions.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Just, making sure that we're covering everything and that you guys, are there to, if it's can't avoid it, that we can, help ensure it. So no, I appreciate that, Jason. All right, Rachel.
Yeah, to build on that too is we really focus on preventing the kind of events that are disruptive to operations for the insureds, whether it be reminding them to check their freezer operations so that all of their research at a research institution doesn't melt and disappear, which has happened, or inspecting playgrounds to avoid harm to children at an elementary school. We cover a lot of those things, and we try to help them identify. We try to help our insureds identify that risk, to address it and to mitigate it. And when those inevitable things do happen, fires, floods, etc., we try to be really responsive so that those who are providing services to others, to the public, can get those back on track. Like, we're generally not public facing, right? We're, sometimes when someone gets hit by a snowplow, we're responding to their claim. Someone called me about that yesterday. I need to maybe rethink my personal cell phone on the website, but we try to help address the things for the institution so that they can do a better job at being publicly facing. Our governor recently used the phrase to invite public employees to be recklessly good. And while as the state risk manager, I want to avoid doing anything recklessly and don't want employees doing engaging in reckless conduct, I like the idea of them being recklessly good and trying to really be innovative and responsive to the public. And when we do a good job on the risk side of helping them identify, like Jason said, guardrails for these innovations and really helping them to see their impact and ways to mitigate risk for their recklessly good endeavors, then I think we help them to step out, to innovate, and then to let them know when you're doing your work, when you're operating within the scope of your employment, you're going to be covered, to try to take the anxiety away of people who are trying to engage with the public and provide public services in a careful, thoughtful way.
Yeah, well said. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Janet.
Well, I don't want to repeat everything that the team has said already. That's really inherent from that liability side, that they stay again in the guardrails. Something that I think that we also do that was addressed is that enterprise risk approach, in that what are we doing, like the governor said, that we're recklessly moving forward in a positive manner? Are we modernizing statutes and laws to ensure that we are more efficient, more effective And are we making change for our taxpayers and being good stewards of taxpayer dollars? So are we reevaluating statutes that may be out of date? So that's something from a risk perspective that sometimes people forget.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I appreciate that. All right, thank you again for all these answers. I think this was a great way to frame the rest of today's discussion. Again, thank you all for joining us. Today's NASCATV Emerging Issues webinar is around risk management. Today's conversation will focus on how state chief administrators and senior leaders can best demonstrate how valuable their risk management programs are. And as was just discussed, risk management is incredibly vital to state government operations. Our panelists will provide promising practices on how to best showcase the return on investment of risk management processes and programs. All right, so let's move into more specific questions on our topic today. So my next question is going to be for Shelley. I'm sure it can be difficult at times to assess certain value on different potential risks. Would you mind providing us with more information on the risks and on the methods and or processes that the state of Oregon utilizes to assess potential risks?
Sure. One of the things that we did to assist our state agencies with how to look at risk, especially related to insurance requirements for contracts and grants, was develop a tool, a product that they could go in and enter some information about their exposures. And at the end of the process, come up with, what do I need for insurance? Or what does the contractor need to provide us for insurance? What does the grantee need to provide us for indemnity and insurance if it's applicable? So our team with our broker, with our insurance broker, Willis Towers Watson, developed a concept, an idea, and ultimately a tool whereby folks can go in on their contracts and grants, put in their exposure information. And at the end of the tool, it gives you the options for what to insert into the actual contract. We think it's been very beneficial. It's the first thing people do when they come to us and ask for assistance, is try to go through the tool, work through the process. And at the end, if they get what they needed and the assessment and can add that right into their contract, I think that takes care of about 90 to 95% of the contracts and grants that we see. The remainder, and the tool has a delegated spot within it to flag us that says this exposure is so large or so unique that we really need our risk consulting unit to engage on how to address those risks even further, because this tool isn't the right spot for that. So there's a way to flag so that it comes to our team for those more unique exposures. So that's available on our website. It is forward facing, so even you all can see it and use it, or go in and take a look at it and see how it might be applicable for your teams. And a lot of folks reach out to us throughout the United States on this tool, and we're very proud of it. We've got a couple of awards from it, but happy to share information along the way if folks want to learn more about the tool.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we'll post that link in the chat, and we'll have it up with the webinar as well when we post it in our Knowledge Center. So, I think one of the benefits of having these webinars is the ability to share information, right? And you don't have to kind of, remake the wheel every time, right? We can share information across states. So, no, I really appreciate that. Thanks, Shelley.
You're welcome.
All right. So Janet, in order to best show the true value of a process or program, benchmarks on which to evaluate progress should be set. Can you explain how Oklahoma, through the risk management team, determines benchmarks for their risk management programs and practices?
Sure. I know it's hard not to want to benchmark yourself against someone else, but from our perspective, it's really about telling our own story. So we do an annual total cost of risk for the state of Oklahoma's risk management program. So we see an overview of our operations year over year. That T-Core tells us not only the cost to operate from a human capital management perspective, cost to operate our self-insured programs, also our programs that operate with commercial coverage. And then for those commercial programs, what's the right attachment point from a self-insured retention basis based off the rates that we're seeing from our commercial carriers. Something else that we benchmark is based off of our loss prevention services that the team offers. And are we seeing a reduction in frequency or severity for our liability programs? We also partner with agencies or higher ed institutions that are truly seeing a pattern in their losses and claims so that we can help them build programs to reduce those costs and eliminate exposures in the effort of having no claims. But as Jason mentioned earlier, we know we're going to have some kind of claim.
Well, and it sounds like it goes back to what you were saying earlier with, being more efficient and making things more effective.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you very much. I appreciate that answer. All right, Rachel. So one method to reduce risks is to consult with and educate all employees. Do you have any recommendations for some promising ways to communicate with employees of all levels to reduce risks?
And the part of your question that's tricky for us to manage is all employees at all levels, right? Because when you take a broader look and application to risk management, it's not just one person, it's the organization. And, we spend a lot of time in the engagement piece, and risk managers at every one of our insured entities are critical to that engagement. We rely on their expertise, on their connections within their own institutions, whether it be a university, a school, the Department of Insurance, whatever the agency is, the entity is. We rely on the risk managers embedded there to do the work, to really engage with their employees. And we try to be a partner with them. And the ways we try to be a partner are things that are probably familiar to everyone on this webinar, which is, we have trainings. Title IX's become a big issue for our insureds. So we've had Title IX trainings to try to provide support there. We do webinars, we do in-person trainings, we send out informational items through email. We do a lot of outreach and attend risk manager meetings across the state, meet with school boards, meet with superintendents, meet with the directors and department heads across the state. But one piece that we really need to think through even more is how to engage with other employees at different levels. There was a bill introduced here in Utah. We just finished our legislative session to require more engagement or more outreach to let educators know what risk management covers. It didn't pass, but it really informed my thinking on this, which is if the person who is doing the work doesn't know that they have this coverage, if they're worried that if they get sued by an angry parent, that they might lose their house, then I'm not doing my job. I need to find ways to better engage with them and help them understand what is and isn't covered. And that helps them to better do their job and feel like they're secure in making the decisions that we're asking people to do every day, whether they be in the law enforcement space and corrections or in education. And for them to be successful, I need to make sure that my division is really helping and supporting them. One thing I wanted to share that we've been doing to try to provide that support is an early intervention program. So what that means is in Utah, all of the risk covered litigation goes to our Attorney General's office and is litigated by the Assistant Attorney Generals in the litigation division there. When it comes to employment claims at entities that don't have access to our state human resources management team, then we offer that support by covering consultation with an AAG before they terminate an employee, or if there's a sticky employment situation. The same is true if a covered entity can see a constitutional issue is bubbling up, or a conflict that is not being resolved well at the entity's level, at the covered entity's level, then we provide we pay for consultation with an AAG, because we found that engaging early and often has really benefited all the employees and the covered entities, and has reduced our losses by making sure that people understand what's available, what the rules are, and how to walk through some of these difficult situations that public employees with the state and higher ed and schools are dealing with every day.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like, especially with the early and often, right, you're helping people kind of reduce their anxiety around, what and won't be covered, and kind of allowing them to know ahead of time, okay, this is how this is going to go, and I can move forward with this knowledge. I mean, I think that's great. Providing people with as much knowledge as you can ahead of time always seems like a good idea to me. So
And
appreciate that.
sometimes, yeah, and sometimes just de-escalate, providing them a resource to de-escalate a situation where they can't quite figure it out within their own entity has been invaluable. So we're really lucky to have that resource.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, Jason. So building off of Rachel's answer about consulting with and educating employees, kind of in that early and often method, your team held a risk management conference on the implications of decision-making back last year in 2022. Is this a conference that's run regularly, or was this a new event? What was your goal for this conference, and how did you achieve that goal?
Sure, I'll do my very best with that. It's going to be tough to follow Rachel. She did a great job with that last question, but we do host an annual risk management conference. It's kind of the centerpiece or the culmination of our training efforts. The conference is in its 28th year, so it's absolutely not a first year we've gone about it. We're on our third year. This last year was a virtual conference. So we did 3 years when COVID started of virtual conferences. Prior to that, it was always in person. So this year, I'm happy to report we're moving our conference back to in person. We're very excited about that. A little background on the conference, if I could just take a minute. Every year, we find a theme that we find is relevant. Last year was implications of decision making. We try and have a little bit of fun with that theme. We build the conference around the theme. We build the conference logo around it. Our target audience is our risk management contacts, safety individuals, sometimes environmental folks, legal, some admin, sometimes facility staff. We've had years where we've had almost 300 folks attend our state risk management conference. It's usually in November. So that the idea of the conference is to take a good blend of current issues or emerging risks. We've done drones, autonomous vehicles, cyber liability, and then combine that with some of the classics such as best practices in claims management, loss reporting, loss control, and really put together program tracks in each of our 4 primary program areas to really address all of our audiences, whether they be work comp, liability, loss control, whatever the topic is. We really try to keep that diversified conference track. And it's been a real, I'm a little bit bragging here on this call, but we're very proud of our conference. We have some very good attendance. Every year, I get the opportunity to do what we call the State of the State risk management address, and we talk about financial positions, loss indicators to the agencies, leading injuries, leading accidents, types of accidents, prevention efforts. It's really a good messaging. So getting into the second question you asked me about the goal is really that education and outreach to our core audiences, which is the risk management audience. That is, the goal is to get the message out and promote risk management and best practices. And if I can just kind of summarize, I'm probably running out of time. We've had a lot of success with the delivery of the virtual conferences. We're very excited to go back to in person because every year prior to this period we're all living through, the best benefit of the conference was the networking. We have folks who don't even know who they're working with on a personal level sometimes, from the agency perspective to the DOA risk management. And that opportunity for a day or two to get together and rub elbows and shake hands and share a meal is invaluable. So we've got a lot of traction over the years over our conference, and we're very proud of it. So I hope I've answered your questions. If not, I'm sure we can address them later.
No, absolutely. And what's the theme for 23, if you don't mind me asking?
We haven't come up with it yet. We have a date and we have a meeting next week. It's a great question. It's a whiteboard activity and it gets really creative. I wish I had the ability to show you some of our past logos. We have a lot of fun with it. We do a graphic design around it. We brand everything really to push that message through. It's a lot of fun. It's a great question. I don't have an answer for you, but I'm sure it'll be creative. 2021. Yeah. I think 2021 was a risk odyssey. We were building off the space odyssey.
Oh, geez. Okay. All right.
We have a lot of fun with the themes and people really seem to enjoy it over the years, but thank you for the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate the answer. All right, so this next question is going to be for all of our panelists. We spoke previously about setting benchmarks for evaluation purposes. Risk monitoring and evaluation are important pieces to reducing risk. What are some additional methods that your organizations use to reduce risks? We're going to start with Janet first.
Thanks. So Shelley kind of hit on this earlier, that something that has been unique for the state of Oklahoma over the last few years, and that really is contract review, where historically the state central purchasing team would do contracts that obviously had terms and conditions for insurance and insurance requirements. But when there was deviation from that, there wasn't typically that conversation with state risk management of what are the risks that the state now assumes if we're going to modify our minimum requirements within a contract or change those terms from a liability perspective. So now all of those contracts that are done through state central purchasing are brought through state risk management if there's a deviation in those terms or those limits of coverage by that vendor. So we do an evaluation, we talk through it, we look at obviously those certificate of insurance from those vendors, and we then ascertain whether the risk is worth it based off the type of service. And, you know, sometimes that conversation with the partner agency that's actually going to utilize that contract is explaining the why and educating them on, while it might be a low dollar figure contract, what's the exposure and the risk to the state of Oklahoma if we do not keep our limits at the set standards or we lower them? Are we going to face some liability because we knowingly allowed a vendor to carry low coverage? So that's a really great discussion that now happens. It also gets purchasing individuals with agencies that may not typically engage with their risk management department or state risk management, thinking through that mindset of what's the risk to the state beyond traditional liability. Are we going to put ourselves in a position that we also risk some other type of liability to their agency, be it press? Do we want to be on the news over something that we've chosen to allow a vendor to do or not do?
Yeah, I think, you know, kind of some fallout that we saw from COVID and some of the vendors that kind of came through there. It's very important to kind of take this initial step to kind of double check all the contacts that come through. It certainly seems like an efficient way of doing things. So I appreciate that. All right, Rachel, you're up next.
I like Janet talking about that because it made me think about, in terms of the contract review, made me think about how we are trying to really train institutions to think through those issues as they engage with vendors, as they plan events and making sure the vendors have appropriate coverage. And then also getting them to think about things like, is a WWE night at an elementary school a good idea? All right, before I don't want it to be a giant wet blanket. So it's us helping talk them through, like, okay, if we're having students or parents, you know, body slam each other or use a chair, like, what does this look like? Like really saying, not just, no, that's terrible, but really trying to engage with the insureds to say, all right, help me see your vision and help me understand what your risk mitigation plan is. And they know that they can reach out. We've, you know, as part of this engagement plan we have, which is engaging with superintendents, higher ed, risk managers all over the state, is to create a culture where they know us and they feel comfortable reaching out and asking questions. And that has been a huge part of benchmarking risks. Is we've seen through these efforts, these engagement and education efforts, we've seen a reduction in claims. One that I mentioned earlier, this early intervention piece, we've actually been able to measure the impact of that program on our claims. So because we cover K through 12, we saw a lot of employment issues, and we said, okay, before you terminate an employee, we anticipate that you are going to reach out and we're going to connect you with an assistant attorney general. We saw our claims drop by more than half because we We helped them walk through these issues and make sure they were doing it correctly. And that has been like a huge cost savings. And also I like to think operationally it saves those covered entities a lot of time and money as well, because dealing with employment litigation is not fun. And so that's been a real benefit to us, and is something that we intend to keep doing and seeing if it makes sense in doing it in other ways. And then one final thing I'll share is we're trying to collect more information and data from our claims and include them in our system so we can say, okay, where are we seeing the hot spots? Where amongst the insureds? And then not just, okay, we know this institution has more claims, but what kind and why? And then we can have our loss control team really work with in the areas that we've identified as needing improvement.
Yeah, that's awesome. So being proactive, it seems like that's been a huge cost savings and also kind of the emotional and mental toll that may take too. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. All right, Shelley, what is your organization doing to reduce risks?
Sure. I think like the folks that just spoke, we're a very data-driven organization. So quickly we can go into our claims management system and really look and see what's happening. So I think that's really invaluable to managers and especially state managers and state leaders to know, at your fingertips, what's happening with the information and the claims that are happening. One of the things that we have is a key performance measure in the state of Oregon around workers' compensation, and it's a claim frequency rate. So we report that measure to our legislative folks. So that's one of the ways that data and measure helps us kind of manage and talk about workers' compensation claims. Our claims team, we have tort claims, liability claims, property claims. We have 2,500 of those every year. So about 0.3% of our claims drive the cost right now of our liability exposure. So we're really diving into that and how do we assist in those areas so that we can reduce the cost. So I think if you have a really robust system that can give you the data sets and go in and take a look, you can really identify trends and themes and be really proactive as a leadership team. So those are the couple measures that we have.
Yeah, wow. It sounds like it's invaluable to have those data points to be able to show, hey, look at what's happening. This is where we know it's happening. These are most of the costs. And we can kind of identify and kind of pinpoint and really get at it. Appreciate that. All right. Jason, same question to you. What is your organization doing to reduce risks?
I don't know that I'm going to say anything shocking that hasn't already been shared. I'll just build on it a little bit. With the conversation around data trending and data, loss information, something we've really taken an active role in doing this last maybe 2 years is using that data, identifying trends within specific agencies or institutions, and then shooting out very pointed follow-ups as far as, regardless of the topic. It could be employee injury, a certain type of injury that's occurring on a irregular basis, or even in let's say a liability matter or a property loss that we feel maybe could have been prevented. So as time allows, we really take that data and go back to our agencies and institutions and really ask them to respond to risk management questions like, hey, this happened, we think there's things you could do to prevent this from the future. What are you gonna do? And that outreach has really ramped up recently. The other thing that I would just mention, kind of building off earlier, somebody talked about a total cost of risk. I'm changing gears a little bit, but data drives decisions, right? So we do a benchmark report every year that's focused on all of our program areas. The primary focus is employee safety, so injuries and accidents, right? This is a detailed report that's shared with all agencies, and I'm not going to go into tremendous detail by any means, but it really lets our agencies benchmark themselves against their history, right? Just multiple years, or other agencies of similar size. And it's got all kinds of data on injury types, cost, spend, and that's been a very useful tool for us for a long time. And we continue to evolve that report and add different metrics. And it's a great tool in the safety, particularly in the employee safety space, that has been really, really beneficial for us.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that answer. The follow-up seems like something that could get a little tense with some of the folks, but it seems like it's very important to do. So
Yeah,
that.
that's sometimes you can, a carrot or a stick, right? Like sometimes it can be, forceful. Other times you try and catch more flies with honey, as they say. Again, my colleagues would probably tell you we don't have authority in all of these spaces, so that is sometimes a challenge. So you're putting your best foot forward to educate. We have some tools in our toolbox to enforce things, but again, you really, in our structure, we really do have to rely on the agencies to help us respond to those things. So I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in that comment, but I'll leave it at that. Maybe if we have time at the end, if somebody has any questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. Thank you, Jason. All right. So we do have some time for an additional bonus question here. So this one again is for all the panelists. So can you provide our viewers with a brief overview of a few current risk management issues that are affecting your states and the steps you plan to take or are already currently taking to overcome these challenges? Shelley, we're going to start with you this time.
Okay, great. I wrote down a few, and then as people were talking, some more came up, but these are the big ones for us. So cyber insurance, everybody has mentioned the need to look at and try to obtain cyber insurance. I think it's exposure for most states. What we found challenging or finding challenging is legacy systems. So we have a lot of systems that have not been updated in a very long time. And we have gone out to the insurance market twice, if not almost 3 times, to see if we could underwrite and obtain cyber insurance. A couple of our quasi-state agencies have been able to procure insurance. Their systems were a little bit more ready. Our state has some work to do in this area, and our chief information officer is preparing, differently now today, knowing that we're not quite ready on the insurance market to obtain a quote. So that's one of the issues that we continue to work on and have been for some time. With everybody going remote during COVID, our program stood up an out-of-state workforce group to look at how to ensure workers' compensation programs for those people that work out of state. And we continue to develop that program. And I think we have folks in all states represented because we continue to allow remote work. So we put people on a Zurich policy, place them on policies when they need it, and then also on the back end, remove them as needed too. Another, I think something to keep on the forefront is the work around diversity, equity, inclusion. How is risk management? How is insurance? How are all the things that we do in our operational day-to-day filtered through a DEI lens? And so we're really looking at that as a state as well. So those are, I think, the biggest things on the forefront for Oregon.
Yeah, and those are definitely some big things. And it's, what we've seen at NASCA too, right, is the workforce issue, and then also cybersecurity, that continues to be a big one, and the DEI as well. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Shelley. All right, Rachel.
I'll highlight 2 things that are top of mind for me. And the first is the claims complexity, length, and cost. Everything has become more complicated in terms of these general liability claims, particularly. I feel like in terms of our, Utah had an earthquake like the week that the world shut down in March of 2020. So that made life complicated, and expensive, but I was really pleased to see how well Utah Risk Management responded to those very, very expensive claims. But in these other cases, the Title IX, the Title VII, the equal protection claims have become more complicated and expensive, which dovetails with the other issue that is top of mind for me, and that is placement, procuring insurance in the private market for the state of Utah. That has become increasingly difficult. When you have an earthquake, you become a less safe bet for the property market. When you have a couple of really big and really public constitutional claims or Title IX claims in our specific case, that makes brokers, gives my broker pause and makes his job a little more difficult as he tries to procure insurance. So what we're trying to do to address these two things that I mentioned, first, in terms of complexity and length, some of that there's not much we can do about, but we're still working on the engage early and often. If you can de-escalate and address things early before everyone's feelings have set in and you're moving down the track, if you can help help our covered entities identify areas of risk in terms of these constitutional claims and help them mitigate that makes a big difference. And then it helps us on our second front, which is procuring coverage. And one thing that we are doing in Utah is last year, the legislature approved forming a captive. And this year they allocated funding for that captive. And so we'll be exploring utilizing a captive to do more self-insurance and to build on with the placement of our coverage and see if we can't reduce our expenses and expand our opportunity to improve overall options and coverage for the state of Utah and its insurance.
Well, best of luck with that. It does sound very complex, but sounds like you
is.
guys got it. You got some good mitigation systems in there. So
Well, if it turns out to be amazing and saves the day, then we will certainly share that out with all of my colleagues.
wonderful. We look forward to that. All right. Jason, what challenges are you guys experiencing?
No, at the risk of being repetitive, I'll just echo both of my peers for the topics that were just ran through. We faced very similar challenges. Top of mind, I think we've already gone through most of them. If I can elaborate just a little bit for the audience, I guess, the issue of we're self-insured like many other states to a large level, and that we buy excess insurance coverages to sit on top of our large self-insured programs. But some of us have been at this a pretty long time, and I can say that it's not remembered when we had markets that have been challenging to navigate to place some of these coverages. I don't want to get too insurance-y in this conversation, but engaging markets, capacity, views of public entity risk in the liability markets, the national, maybe even global property losses are all driving costs. I guess the reason I'm sharing all this and where a lot of folks are going at the state level are being forced to go or challenged is really looking at alternative methods to finance risk. And we won't maybe talk about those today per se, but we're all being tested. This kind of classic market that most of us are used to over the decades that will go up and then there'll be some reprieve, or you'll adjust a program structure and you can, live to fight another day. That's not been that way the last 2 or 3 years or more. And I'm not a broker, but I don't see that changing anytime soon. So I think one of the biggest challenges is creatively structuring programs, whatever those may look like. Everybody's going to be a little different. But the message is very real. It's hard to do this right now. I've never seen such a challenging time. And we don't have risks like maybe a coastal risk or some of the other risks that are very, very prevalent to some other states. And we're still challenged in these spaces. So I'll end on that note, but that is front of my mind all the time, is how this program, our program, looks moving forward. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good note, right? Of just continuing to stay creative. I'm sure that's a challenge every day, and hopefully things will improve. But I agree with you. The way the world's going, it seems not. But there's always creative solutions out there. So thanks, Jason. I appreciate that. All right, Janet, what challenges is your state experiencing?
Unfortunately, not unique to us, as everyone's addressed, and Rachel hit on. Property insurance for the state of Oklahoma is probably number one from the perspective of us having 27 billion in assets in Tornado Alley. So obviously 27 billion in assets in one small state, and where we're located obviously gives the markets a lot of angst on what they want to write and how they want to insure us. We are changing our model, as well as Rachel addressed, of taking a significant per claim retention that we've never had historically. We've always had very low retentions from a property perspective, and we are looking to retain those dollars in-house And we are kind of set up as a captive already from a self-insured perspective. So we don't necessarily have to create a captive, but we will be owning those risks and keeping those premium dollars in-house rather than paying them out to the market. So that's a big change for us that's coming this year. And there's a lot of support from the governor and our state COO and our state CFO. So we're pretty excited about that. Cyber for us has actually been very successful from the perspective of whether people like to hear it from the state agencies. Unification of IT controls was the key for us. And we put a policy in place about 8 years ago that covered all agencies because of the unification process. And that included those non-unified agencies. But what we did see 2 years ago is non-unified agencies that don't have all those controls in place that our state CIO requires now have to get standalone policies. And that is the big challenge, because not only are they able to get, well, if they're able to get a policy, their rates are so much different and higher than the unified consolidated policy. And then we have some agencies, because of what their book of business is, carriers just won't even quote them. So that IT unification process for us has been very successful, but it's now created a situation that those that have chosen not to unify and aren't required to per the statute are now having to really struggle to get that coverage. And obviously the state risk management team has to cover them from the perspective of reaching out to the markets and helping them get those quotes and explain what that means. So it creates a lot of work for the risk management team, but that's their job. And then probably the last one that I haven't heard anyone mention other than it's a problem because we can't seem to find the market at an affordable rate is law enforcement legal liability. That is a big struggle for us, is trying to find a market that will rate us and provide a quote that's actually something that's in the best interest of taxpayer dollars. And we haven't been able to find that yet.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a tough one with what's
Hot topic.
happened the past couple of years, which, you know, around all of these challenges, the last couple of years have certainly bumped them up, I'm sure, from what you've all been seeing previously. But it sounds like quite the challenges ahead for risk management, but you all have some good programs and practices in place to deal with them. So, all right, thank you all for that. I really appreciate it. We're gonna close out with one last question. So for those in the call, what is your one key takeaway, your golden nugget from today's conversation? Rachel, we're gonna start with you.
I just want to thank my colleagues or my peers on this call for what they've shared. And it gave me a lot of thoughts about how we can improve our own symposium that we have each year. And also just our outreach and data, sort of data mining efforts. I think we could really drill down on some of the information and try to find better risk mitigation. And, you know, I kind of liked what Jason was saying about sharing some of that data with the covered entities and saying, here's where you rank amongst your peers. And I like the idea of encouraging people to be a little competitive in their risk mitigation strategies. So I thought that was really useful. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Jason.
No, just again, echoing, these kind of conversations are very enlightening to me. The takeaway I have, the golden nugget, so to speak, is that states are very different when you really, we all know that, right? Involved in these organizations, but at the same time, the challenges we face are very similar. So when you hear conversations like this, it's just really important to keep that peer network open. And we're all doing our very best to deal with the situations we have, and a lot of things align, right? We have a lot of similar topics, and I think any opportunity to share ideas and information, amongst public entities is useful. Sometimes we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can maybe just call a colleague or peer and use that time to be off to a good start. So nothing specific comes to mind with your question other than the networking that these kind of calls creates, and the fact that we all are facing very, very similar challenges on a daily basis. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Thank you, Jason. Shelley, what's your one key takeaway?
My key takeaway for anything risk is creativity. I think we are great problem solvers and solution finders, and love to engage people in risk conversation. Is kind of where we geek out. So just be creative in your solutions.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely what I heard today, is that everyone is very creative. And yes, I definitely appreciate the geeking out. So, all right, Janet, what's your golden nugget?
I think everyone's hit on it, but again, it's that partnership with the other states to talk through what's working, what's not. And while we want to commiserate on the problems that we face, everyone's got, again, like Shelley said, creative approach, and what can we do to help each other and talk through those things. So that bringing us together to talk insurance nerd, because risk management is my favorite topic of all the teams that I have oversight of, because again, it touches every one of our employees and every one of our agencies in so many ways. But speaking to the other states and our other partners to say what's working, what's not, how did that work for you? Was there a takeaway that you should have made a change in a different way? And how can we continue to step forward? I think that's our biggest opportunity and golden nugget out of this.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right, I want to thank all of our panelists today, Shelley, Jason, Rachel, Janet. I really appreciate all the work that you brought into today's conversation. Thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. I thought this was a great discussion. I hope everyone will join us for our next NASCATV TV webinar on April 19th. Our topic is building electrification. So please save April 19th at 3 p.m. Eastern time in your calendars. All right. Again, thank you very much for joining us here at NASCATV. This recording will be available up on the Knowledge Center in the next few days. We'll also include some resources in what was discussed here, so to provide and continue to enhance the education there. And please feel free to share this recording with your team members as well. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you all for being with us today on this webinar. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.